Well, welcome to Jumpstart number 12. This is an aspen forest painting using a layering technique. So we'll just call it the aspen layering painting. So what do I mean by layering? Well, layering is a process by which we paint a successive series of layers of paint right over succeeding layers of paint that are dry when we do the painting. This is not wet into wet because we allow the paint to dry between each successive layers. So here's an example of a layering project that we're going to be doing today. So take a look at our first layer of paint. And you can see here that this layer is colorful, it's got a lot of variety, but it does a couple of things. First of all, it pushes itself into the background, so the paint parts the background, and it takes those white forms, which are going to be tree trunks, pulls those towards us as viewers. Now let's go ahead and look at the second step. The second step, we put another layer of paint, a little darker this time, right over the first, and also around, I think, 4 more tree trunks. And those tree trunks are a little lighter than the background. So now we have a new background further off into space, away from us, and we have the white tree trunks still very close to us. But now we have kind of a middle ground series of trees. And this photograph, or step 3 we'll call it, we have the darkest layer of paint painted right over the second layer. And in addition, we paint around some tree trunks, some really small tree trunks in there, and scrape out some. And we've created a new background that's going way back into the forest. And we've pulled out 2 middle ground groups of trees, some further away than others. And we have those white tree trunks that are right there, as close to us as they ever were, if not even closer looking. So the layering process creates 3-dimensionality, which we call push-pull. Now, I've got a couple of resources here that you're going to should be aware of. And the first is of a typical aspen forest in central Colorado that I photographed a few years back. And you'll see that it's sort of like what we're going to be painting today. I don't try to copy this, and I don't encourage you either as you paint. But just kind of follow along and see how I go about it. But this is the idea. And the second resource that you should be aware of is this of an aspen tree trunk or 2 close up, and you'll get an idea of some of the details that we have on the tree that we need to include in the painting to give this painting a sense of vitality and life and reality. So let's get started. Join me in the demonstration. So as you can see here, I'm starting off with a very simple drawing. Not complex at all, not like the last Jumpstart. We have, because the complexity gets added in at the other end. So these 3 sets of parallel lines represent 3 tree trunks, 3 white tree trunks. They are going to be the dominant and closest tree trunks in this aspen forest. And we're going to start off by painting the first background layer. I'm using a big brush here, but I'll switch over later on. Big brush, 2-inch brush. And even though we're painting this piece by piece, each piece that I paint will have a lot of variety. It'll be like a little mini wet into wet painting. In other words, let's keep the variety rolling in here. You'll see. This wash is a light wash. And you can have quite a bit of leeway on this depending on what season you're painting. For instance, if we were doing a fall season, this could be very orange and browns. Not a lot of color mixing on the palette. I'm just letting it be directly mixed on the page. This is that's fun. Okay, let's blow dry this. It's a very relaxing way to paint because they're natural stop places. This would be a great time to recharge your coffee latte, for instance. Okay, let's erase some of these lines. They're not going to do us any good. This is a good time to do some erasing. And now we're going to go on to the next layer of paint. To do that, we'll need to sketch in a few more trees because we're going to paint around those trees. For instance, where do you think we need them? Well, I think we could probably use another tree in here. Okay, a tree just being a cylinder at this point. And I think we probably need, a horizontal tree trunk also. Sitting here on the forest floor. I think we need one in here. Okay, these are going to be smaller trees. Boy, the spacing is important, of course. But we can make adjustments if we don't like it, so. Okay, so I've got 5 tree trunks. Started with 3, I've added 5 more. We're going to now paint around those new tree trunks that I've sketched in, and also paint around the white ones. So this is going to be a little more time consuming. And I am going to shoot for a middle value with this wash. And I'm thinking of a midsummer aspen forest in the Rocky Mountains. So let's just go with a green color and then change it as we go. Boy, pretty dark, so I might have to lighten it up. So to encourage that three-dimensional effect, definitely have a little similarity between right side and left side of your object. So this color is basically the same as that color, and that'll increase the three-dimensionality. So we have a little yellow there. Well, we don't have any, so that's not great. I might have to touch a little dark green in there. So that's good. This is good. A little darker than I need, I think. So let's lighten it up a touch. So I'm going to do a little blue here. Let's get a little more blue over there. There we go. So the spacing over here I don't like. What I'm going to do is add in something with my scrub brush, clean scrub brush, just to maybe change the spacing of these white shapes. Okay, and you can do that at this stage very easily. The other thing you can do is, if some of the edges are a little too outrageous, you can scrub them into a better semblance of treeness, or you can actually paint them a little carefully right now. So I don't like this tree. It gets fat and thick. It looks like a boa constrictor rather than an aspen trunk. So let's straighten it out a touch. This is something you can do at any stage of the game, though, is painting piece by piece and layering. such a relaxing way to paint. But it does take time. This is getting skinny down here. I don't like that. Let's see if I can fix that right now. Okay, so it's still a little irregular, but you know, we've got another layer to paint and we can take care of a lot of the irregularities in the next layer. But still, I'd like to take care of that now. We're not finished. Now, in your painting, there might be a lot of things you want to take care of a lot sooner than me. And that's great. By all means, this is not wet into wet painting. In wet into wet painting, you really can't stop. You have to plug along with what the paper allows you to do. And that's very much dependent on timing. You have to do it fast. Boy, I don't like that. So let's see if I can. Small brush to make these corrections. I still want to keep those background layers nice and wet looking, not pasty. With a lot of strokes. So now I'm getting rid of some of the extra strokey look that I managed to accumulate. Well, I'm going to have to repaint that, but I think the next layer I can do that. So as you can see now, we have 2 layers basically of paint applied, and that layer that I just did created sort of middle ground tree shapes that are grayish in value. Whereas we still have the white, it's coming out even more. Still a lot of ragged edges. So we can take care of that now. But whatever you can take care of now is a good time to do it. Doesn't have to be perfect though. Perfection arrives slowly at the end. Yeah, I'm going to have to just repaint this better. Well, repaint around it. There we go. But it's better than it was to begin with, so I'm pretty happy with it. So here we are at the end of our second layer, and we still have a third layer, the dark layer, to go in behind a group of new tree trunks. But you know, I'm going to take a break, maybe have a little tea, maybe have lunch, and then come back and okay, after break, here I am ready to paint. the next layer, but I noticed I forgot to put in an important layer, and that is the clear story. And really the clear story should have been painted around in the last layer I put in. So as a workaround, I'm going to scrub this clear story out, and you'll see that it'll add some definition to everything. Okay, so a little bit of water in the clear story area. So we've been talking about how this layering ideas gives you a sense of three-dimensionality. Another way of calling that would be push-pull, that every layer you put in tends to push that layer back into the background. But it's really not the most important three-dimensional effect in painting and drawing. The most important is, even more important than perspective, is overlap. And so what I'm doing right now, I'm overlapping. I'm creating an overlapping object. And the way our eye works is that this will be a very strong element. There will be no question about what the closest thing in the picture is. And that is this bunch of foliage that I'm suggesting, at this point suggesting, exists. So far I've been using traditional watercolors that are not staining, so I can really scrub out. I can scrub out almost to white paper. In this next step, I'm going to be adding a staining color called phthalocyanine blue, sometimes just called phthalo blue. And that color, once applied, it's a great color. It will actually keep the darks colorful. But that color I will not be able to scrub out like I'm scrubbing this out. It's so strong that it will stain, profoundly stain the paper. So that when I scrub it, if I can lighten it up, but it will always lighten up at most to a pale blue. Whereas here, we're lightening up almost to pure white. There is a green tinge, and that's fine. I could probably go even stronger with the scrubbing and lighten it up even more, but I might start damaging the paper. Okay. Now, I need to dry this off because I really do not need any water bleeding around and seeping into from one area into another. So okay, brush in hand. So new color, phthalo blue. Very staining. It's got its own palette because this color tends to get into all of these colors. It's so strong, so that my whole palette will end up being, instead of pure yellow, greenish yellow, instead of pure reds, purpley colors. So we have to be careful with it. Keep a clean brush. And I have already sketched in a few smaller tree trunks here that you can see some lines. So what I'm going to do is paint this next and last layer of paint. And it's going to be in the middle dark to dark range. Let's see what I can do with this 1-inch brush. I may have to move into a smaller brush, some of my small rounds, and I will. This is a very time-consuming step because we're going to be painting a lot of little areas. Okay, there's my blue. Oh, it's such a beautiful blue. And it's very permanent, very inexpensive color. Give it a try. But be warned, it's a dangerous color on your palette. You're going to end up with some muddy paintings if you don't watch it. Okay, let's go on here. So basically, we don't need to paint the whole page. We're going to go across and do the darks right along the middle of our forest. Take a look at the resource and you'll see that's where the darks are positioned. One of the things we can do in this stage is scrape out too. Nothing like a dense pigment to enable scraping out. So we'll be doing that as we go through piece by piece, layer by layer. This is the time to kind of clean things up too. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to actually change brushes. So another color we can try that has this really dense quality and very dark quality is Payne's Gray. So I'll try a little Payne's Gray in this also. This is phthalo blue though in yellow, so it's a dark green. If you have phthalo green, you could also use that. So let's try a little bit of that Payne's Gray and see how that goes. Unfortunately, Payne's Gray is just a really boring color. It's not a color at all. It's basically a absence of color. But it's pretty dark. It goes well in an area that's supposed to be dark. That's pretty fun. It sort of reminds me that I need to darken my phthalo. The phthalo blue will go that dark too. So let's get some really dark phthalo blue. Continue on. Here's some pure phthalo blue. And you can see that's dark too. But it doesn't have to be incessantly dark. So I'm lightening things up a little bit. I just keep variety. You know, watercolor's about variety, about gradation. Keep that in mind. Let's get some other colors in here too, the dark area. I'm going to add a little opaque color in the wet. Now, if you do opaque over the dry, it's kind of muddy and it's not very successful. But if it's wet, the paint's still wet. Boy, I love the way it just kind of merges and mingles. So that's cobalt turquoise. Okay, so we have this little bit of dark right here. Maybe I need a little bit over there. All right, we're going to cross over this central tree trunk and continue on with the same color scheme. Boy, this is fun, you know, and things, some days, you sort of feel like you're with it. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm painting especially well, but it does mean I feel good, which is probably the main thing. Could also mean I just had a coffee latte, so don't trust those positive feelings too much. The feelings to trust are those critical ones where, oh, that doesn't look quite good. No, there's something about that that's wrong. Those feelings you can trust. Enjoy the positive, but trust your body when it comes to how you're doing, and your gut will know if you're doing it okay before anything. I don't like that. I trust that feeling. So let's go ahead and see what I can do, scrubbing out. I don't have to scrub it out to white. I won't be able to, but I just need to get it a little lighter. Looks like my engorged python there. I'm going to have to work with that a little bit while I've got the scrub brush out. You can see I can't scrub that phthalo blue out, but I can lighten it up. Okay, and we'll have to go in and fix that when it dries. Meanwhile, I've got plenty to do over on this side. Here we go. I'm using a Taklon brush, which is a synthetic fiber, tapered and roughed up. That's why it's Taklon. It's not just nylon, but it's a treated nylon. And it's usually colored brown. And it goes by different names. But I just love the brushes. They just, in every way except one, they're better than Sable. You might ask, well, what's the one way it's not better than Sable? Hang in there, and I'll tell you. sable brushes hold more water, a lot more water than Taklon. Taklon is not absorptive at all, actually. Well, it is. They try to make it that way, but it just holds about, I'd say, a third as much water as a equal-sized sable brush. But it turns out that you can just get a bigger Taklon brush. So this is a pretty big looking brush, you know, it's at, I don't know, 14 or something. But I think my number 6 or number 8 sable will do just as well. Just about as well. So why buy Taklon if sable is better? Because you have to buy them, and sable is just outrageously expensive. I don't like what's happening in there, so I'm going to stop talking a bit here. We're going to go. So Robert E. Wood always said, when in doubt, paint faster. I'll add, when in doubt, shut up and paint faster. And that gets you into the right side of the brain. There's a reason for why he said that. So this is feeling a little better now. We need to get some dark over there. We have got some middle dark, but it's time to now go for some dark. Let's see if we can't get some variety in these darks. This is another color I like to scumble on. It's opaque, and that's yellow ochre. Pretty opaque color. It looks best when it's pressed into wet paint. Looks like I've got my palm print over here, which is unfortunate. But that'll add a little texture to that tree trunk, which it'll need. Now I could try a little Payne's Gray to get totally dark. I'm going back to my normal palette, getting away from the phalos. I do some work in the foreground to clean things up. Okay. Make some adjustments. I think it's time to maybe add some lighter areas so that we can paint into them and get some color in the ground plane here of the forest. We've got a little there, that's good. You need a little more there. Just cleaning up the tree trunks a little bit. This one, boy, needs help, I think. Yeah, I'm gonna have to hold off a little bit on that. I'm using Arches paper, 140 pound, and for scrubbing out, it's a very good middleweight paper. I don't know any better. It's durable and pretty consistent. Better yet is Arches 300 and 400 pound paper. You should treat yourself to that. There are other papers that are good too. I really like Fabriano. And it's got a better price point than the Arches, but it's not quite as good scrubbing out. If you're not part of the scrub out school of painting, then yeah, you might try the Fabriano. I could see why you'd like Fabriano as opposed to the Arches. So I've got these kind of lighter areas, and before I take a break, let me finish this off. Let's just see what a little bit of red. Now I've got phthalo blue in my brush, which I don't like. So it won't be bright red, but maybe that's okay. We'll see. Okay, let's just see how that is. Okay, so we've done a third layer here of paint, and we've created the illusion of several dimensional layers. We've got the foreground white. These all tend to stand out and be close. And we have, of course, the closest thing to us, which is right here, the foliage, clear story foliage, which is the closest because of overlap. But the white coming forward is because just of the push-pull of the layering. And then we have the very, very background in the forest. We got some darkest darks. Looks like I could use a little more in there. And then we have the intermediate layers, the kind of gray tree trunks. Step 3, the final stage anyway, of doing the details that are going to make this into a landscape painting. So in the interim, I have cleaned up this area a bit, just straightened some of these trees up, continued through the foliage to straighten the trunks up so that they made a little more sense. And now we're going to proceed in this. The first step I'm going to do is do something with this branch that's coming down into the severe foreground. And I think I'll use a flat brush. I do like this 1-inch flat. Probably use flat wash brushes more than I use round brushes by quite a bit. And I'm mixing a green, a light green up, a little cerulean blue and yellow, my cadmium yellow, and just a touch of red. Most greens have a touch of, natural greens have a touch of red in them. They're not pure. So here we go. This is pretty light. It's going to be a pretty light wash. Good habit to get in is to change the color or value every time you go back to the palette for more paint, whether you need it or not. There'll be times when you don't, but that's a decision you can make that you don't do it this time. The other option is you get into a lazy state where you never change the color unless you need it, and of course, normally you wouldn't think you needed it, which means you end up with a lot of flat washes, which don't look very exciting, and they don't look like watercolor. So, going back in to lighten this up. Even so, that looks pretty boring, pretty flat, so let's add some cobalt turquoise in it. There we go. Now we have a little more change in there. A little more variety in that wash. And then we have to do something with a few branches, which we'll do later on. I can probably do that. All right, next step. Let's take a look at some of the structure, the details within the aspen trees. And I'm going to be using those very characteristic eye shapes surrounding branches. And then we're also going to be taking some of those lines, those linear elements that circle around the bark of an aspen tree and use those. Also, there are a lot of little dots in an aspen. If you look at the close-up of an aspen tree, you'll see a lot of dotting. And so we'll use that really to give some presence. And we'll also cast some shadows. Okay? And that's basically how I'm going to add variety and add detail to the centers of interest, which are these light subjects. Let me use a round brush. I do have some branches extruding from that, especially this center. The center aspen, we do have a branch coming right out here. And I'm going to be cutting right across some dark areas. So I'm going to scrub that out. Maybe that'll be good. I've got one there already. I think I could use another one. Be there. Okay. That'll be enough for now. All right. Aspen Eye is coming up. They're little targets that can really trap your eye, and that's why I'm loosening the edges a bit. I expect to go back in and darken some of this up after we cast the shadows. We don't need to fully decorate every aspen out here. In fact, if you do, it'll become a very spotty painting. But to say the least. But right now it's starting to get a spotty look already, which is something that takes away from the fluid, wet look that I'm trying to achieve here with my paintings. Blurring a little bit, and we're going to be casting some shadows next. And wow, we're going to be using a big brush to cast shadows, because this is going to be, at this stage, not tiny little shadows. This first shot at it, the shadows are going to be big and up and really address the whole forest rather than the foreground tree. So, first of all, I think we need a shadow there. Okay, so now that's got rid of some of that spotty look, which I wanted to do. But let's look at the shadow that's going to go on our center of interest, our big tree. I better blow dry all this because it's still a little wet. I'm going to use a 1-inch flat wash brush for this. I'm going to use the same cobalt blue, but I'm going to lighten it up as we go, as we turn around here. So you'll see what I'm talking about. Lighten it up and probably warm it up at the same time. So here's a little bit of ochre and red. Okay, I need some more work in here. It needs to be dry before I do any more. So I'm going to go back up here and do this, work on this, and work on the foreground. Maybe the foreground first. That needs it the most. foreground. Foreground is probably the second most important part of any painting. And there's a center of interest, which you're in control of deciding about. But the foreground, no matter what the painting is, if you don't have a little extra interest in the foreground, whether it be abstract or whether it be a realistic painting, you are going to have a painting that will seem unfinished. So we need to add a little bit of extra. That red. I'm going to have to cut it down a bit. I've got some really beautiful red roses in the garden right now. They look great in our garden, but maybe not so great here. Red is a very magnetic color, so you really have to be a little bit cautious with it. Because it'll attract attention by itself. And then you need to balance it out. So let's make it maybe more of a purple. I'm creating a flower here. I don't know if it exists or not, so. Okay, now let's go back into this area. We don't. I need to define some more of the branches, and then decide on how much of the leafage should I show. It's not a very important part of the painting, so the less it's important as from an abstract point of view as a shape. Pretty obvious what it is. Okay. That was a telephone call I had. let's suggest some leaves by suggesting we have a silhouette of the leaves showing up against the background. Do a little bit of that. Some leaves on the edge might work out pretty well. And I can perhaps scrub out a few shapes that will suggest that we have leaves here. Okay. I got this strong urge to do exactly what I'm doing now, so my intellect in painting is always the last to know. So while I'm saying, yeah, maybe we need some leaves intellectually in here, my hand is taking control, and I totally trust it. And it's saying, keep it simple, stupid. And that's what I'm doing. So I think we're not going to worry too much about extra leaves. I do think I need something here, though. And there are a couple of things we can do. This particular limb, twig, or whatever's coming out of this eye can cast an arcing shadow, kind of like that. That can be very decorative. However, it's placed so that that interferes with this shadow, which is a cast shadow from that. So I'm going to see if I can't make that cast shadow work as a dominant, interesting shadow. And then if that doesn't work, I'll just scrub it all out and then do the other option. So what we'll do is just give it some contrast. Yeah, you know, I don't think that's a good idea. It's not working very well here, so let's set it up. Set it up for the limb shadow. Now, I could definitely do a little more in that eye. It's very dark. By looking at my resource, it just looks like it's black. And that is not something I want. So we're going to give it some color. This is kind of a purple color. Let it lighten up a touch. Okay, and plan two. Let's do something with that kind of shadow. Getting close to being finished. just a few more dots, I think, which I can do. And I'm just going to use my brush. Dry brush, because that's wet. I'm drying my brush. So this is part of the foreground, and so that's the reason why I'm doing this, partly is to satisfy the foreground need for something down here. Not so important up here, over here, just this side. Okay, I'm going to stop the demonstration at this point. I will undoubtedly make some corrections, minor corrections, for the final piece. And I will point those out here at the end. I'll show you this picture and the final picture. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you for the next Jumpstart.